Robservations with Robert, Meyer, Burnett.
Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, your sommelier of cinema and sci-fi, your archbishop of Banterbury, your chancellor of cheerfulness, your evangelist of the imagination, and your existential Mr. Rogers, Robert Meyer Burnett. And once again, I am Robcasting it. You imagination connoisseurs, you members of this, the Post-Geek Singularity. This is Robservations, the show about something, episode number 671. Now, let me just say, I don't consider myself a crusader or somebody that is particularly prone to be fighting for social justice or screaming and yelling at the top of my lungs about wrongdoing that one man is doing to another man or humankind is doing to one another, because human beings have been awful to each other throughout the entirety of human history. So, pick your poison. Pick which thing you want to be outraged about, because there's 100 other things to be outraged about right behind you. To me, outrage is not what we need. We need action. And my little neck of the woods, what I would like to be doing, I guess the raison d'etre of my life, is to be a storyteller, or is to help others tell their stories, because I believe that telling stories to one another is probably the very best way to convey thoughts, feelings, emotions, information, points of view to one another. And I don't think there's ever been a more powerful storytelling medium than motion pictures. I've often said on this show, when you're watching a movie, there's people from all walks of life, people that don't know one another, that are maybe as different from one another as the North Pole is from the South Pole. Very different kinds of people will all gather together, 500, maybe 1,000, in the dark. All shapes, sizes, colors, creeds, and when the lights go down, they forget what their differences with one another might be, and assuming that they're polite and they don't have their goddamn cell phones on and they're texting with someone else while they're sitting in the movie theater, which if you do, you're a piece of shit. But anyway, as long as the lights go down, everybody is equal. And you know what? We look at that story that unfolds on the screen, and our minds are open, our eyes are open, our senses are open, and we just take it all in. And to me, that's how I've chosen to lead my life. Hopefully, try and tell those kinds of stories that ultimately have some kind of a meaning or some kind of resonance with people. So people will either be entertained, maybe people will learn, maybe people will be pushed to action of some kind because they were moved or something happened when they were watching that story unfold on the screen. And if it's not on the screen, then maybe it's at home watching the television when they encounter a film or a TV show or something that changes their lives somehow. One of my favorite genres of these kinds of stories has been horror. And I'll tell you, I've always thought of horror as being one of the most moral of genres, because at the end of the day, the horror genre is all about defining through the horror what it means to be human. And I've always sort of found it, while yes, horror can be very rough. Horror frequently involves loss of life, bloodletting, all kinds of degradation. And I think there's something cathartic about the horror genre. There always has been. But horror has always run afoul of social critics who have said, oh, that's too transgressive. You can't tell those stories in the context of horror. Nope. Too disturbing. People can't take it. I mean, my whole life, I've been feeling or hearing or experiencing those who would say that horror is not something anybody should be exposed to. In my life, some of the films that are, I think, transcendent, things that I've watched that have affected me deeply, Things like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Night of the Living Dead. People say that those are sort of post-Vietnam era films, but they both, well, they were genre trendsetters, certainly. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, with its combination of lo-fi and gonzo filmmaking, for whatever reason, talk about verisimilitude, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre is right at the top. And if you think about horror, there's different kinds of horror. There's the supernatural horror, ghosts, goblins, monsters, werewolves, Frankenstein, those kinds of things. That's one kind of horror. Then there's the relentlessly realistic kind of horror about human beings perpetrating horrors on one another, whether it's Last House on the Left, whether it's Martyrs, whether it's Raw, things like that. And then there's also combinations, or there's movies. My favorite horror film of all time is The Exorcist. Why do I love The Exorcist so much? Because to me, The Exorcist is about two people, two human beings, who have, unfortunately, in confronting evil, have both failed utterly the person that they're supposed to be protecting. In the case of The Exorcist, at first it's a mother. It's Chris MacNeil, played by Ellen Burstyn, superlatively played by Ellen Burstyn, and the direction of William Friedkin, with the documentary style, the complete verisimilitude. As we all know, The Exorcist is about the corruption of an innocent, the most innocent of all girls, Regan MacNeil, who likes to make crazy creatures out of clay. But when the devil takes up residence inside your soul, there's nothing a mother can do. A mother's love is not great enough to solve this problem. And we get to see what happens when a human being is powerless against evil. And then on the other hand, you have a priest, Damien Karras, a good man, a caring man, presumably the best kind of priest, who truly is a man of the cloth and believes in the word of the Lord, who has lost his faith because the guilt he feels not being there for his mother, not being able to provide for his mother when she passed away alone without him. And he's lost his faith in God. Everything he is as a man is gone from him. And it isn't until he ends up confronting the evil that is inside Ray MacNeil that he can find his faith again. And his faith allows him to save that innocent soul. And at the same time, Chris MacNeil has to leap beyond her own beliefs and embrace things she never would have believed prior to this experience, and seeks out Damien Karras. So in doing so, they actually do end up finding the very things within them that make them the human beings that they are. Chris MacNeil is not going to be defeated as a mother, even though she's confronting the ultimate evil. She seeks out Damien Karras and is willing to open her mind and embrace things that she might not otherwise have. And Damien Karras, in confronting this evil, understands that if this kind of evil exists, God must exist. And at the end of the movie, spoiler alert, he is able, because of his belief, he is able to summon the demon out of Regan's body. Because, let's face it, a devil would much rather possess a priest than a little girl. A little girl doesn't provide any kind of... That's easy to do. What you're doing then is you're just fucking with the people around you or the people outside of that little girl. But you get a priest. That's a prize. But Damien Karras finds it within himself to dive out that window, taking his own life and destroying the entity that is possessing him in the process. I know. Exorcist 3, 1990. I get that. But in terms of The Exorcist and William Peter Blatty's original novel, it's my favorite horror film. Bar none, because of its themes. Also, let's face it, the visual effects work, the makeup effects, the language, all of it, also very entertaining if you're a horror film fan. Well, anyway, I'll tell you, I'm always looking for horror that surprises me, because so much of it, I wouldn't call it disposable, but a lot of horror is more funhouse horror than anything else. It doesn't always work. You know, look, as much as I love, say, a werewolf movie or a vampire movie, predominantly the vampire movies that we've been able to see in our lives, whether it's Hammer, whether it's Jean Rollins' lesbian vampire movies or something like Daughters of Darkness, or whether it's the cool chic of The Hunger, or whether it's the fun of Fright Night. Man, I'll watch any, or Only Lovers Left Alive. There's so many different kinds of vampire movies that all have varying degrees of success in terms of being resonant to the human experience. There's very few horror films, I mean, I already mentioned Texas Chainsaw, that transcend. I think Rosemary's Baby is one of those things. But I'm always looking for horror material, whether it's novels, whether it's Silence of the Lambs, Seven. Or I love great serial killer stories because they speak to the craziness of the human condition. After all, the monsters and serial killers are us, or reflections of us. But seldom do I see things that I'm like, my God. I mean, Martyrs did that to me, but do I watch something that I feel is transcendent? Well, Amazon's new series, Them, which is the story of a black family that moves from North Carolina to Compton in I think 1953, is such a transcendent horror series. It is unrelenting. In terms of the audience, man, it does not let you go. There is no respite in Them. It never gets easier. You barely can catch a breath. Seldom have I seen a horror series that creates such an overwhelming sense of dread. And it is, my friends, hardcore. But at the same time, what I love about this series is it is giving you something that, well, we haven't really seen. On this show, the whole point of this series, I say it at the end of every episode. Every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear. And at the same time, all you have to do is listen. And at the same time, there's a lot of call for now diversity in entertainment. Let's have more representation. So, of course, Them, which is a story about a black family and the Great Migration. A lot of black families moved from the Jim Crow South or the East Coast of America to the West Coast of America in the 50s. This is a story that is steeped and based in actual history. Black history, American history, and of course, the insane, well, let's call it the intensity, the reality of it is, like all good horror, too much for some people, apparently. And there are a lot of folks that are not happy with it. And a lot of op-ed pieces are being written about what does it mean. And I want to go over that, but I want to point out that this series was in fact created by Little Marvin. Here is Little Marvin. Here's a picture of Little Marvin. Here's another picture of Little Marvin. Now, he really doesn't have that many credits to his name. He has a few, but this is his first major credit. And he created this series. And not knowing much about him, and I don't usually like to judge a book by its cover, but I would say that, well, he looks like the kind of creator that everybody's talking about. The kind of creator we haven't heard much from. A new voice, as it were. And I wanted to find out more about him. Who is Little Marvin? Where does he come from? How did he get this job? So, there is an article in Variety. Joe Otterson wrote this article on October 8th, 2019. Little Marvin, the writer and executive producer of the upcoming Amazon horror anthology series Them Covenant. It's only called Them now, but Covenant is the title of 2 of the episodes of the series, has signed an overall deal with Amazon Studios. Under the deal, Marvin and his production company Odd Man Out will create and produce original series and films for Amazon. There aren't enough exclamation points to express how thrilled I am to partner with my Amazon Studios family on this new adventure, Marvin said. Their bold and visionary dream team have been extraordinarily nurturing during the process of creating our first series together. Them Covenant. Elated to call them my home and look forward to creating even more together with this new partnership. Them received a 2-season order at Amazon last July. That's very unique. The series will feature a different cast, setting, and story each season. The first season, Covenant, is set in the 1950s and centers on Henry, Ashley Thomas, and Lucky Emery, Deborah Ayrine, I think, who decide to move their family from North Carolina to an all-white Los Angeles neighborhood. The family's home on a tree-lined, seemingly idyllic street becomes ground zero, where malevolent forces, both real and supernatural, threaten to taunt, ravage, and destroy them. Amazon Studios is the perfect home for little Marvin and his seemingly endless talents. We are already captivated with his gripping vision for the upcoming Amazon original series Them, says Vernon Sanders, co-head of television for Amazon Studios. We know that little Marvin will create even more impactful, relevant, and entertaining projects for the global Prime Video audience. The Amazon deal was brokered by Lichter Grossman. In addition to his writing and executive producing duties on the first 2 seasons of Them, Marvin is also writing the as-yet untitled Teddy Pendergrass movie for Warner Brothers with producers Donald DeLine, Tyrese Gibson, and Lee Daniels. Now, in this day and age, first of all, kudos to you, sir, for scoring that kind of a deal. I think that's a huge vote of confidence in your work. And having not seen it myself, if I had read this article or paid any attention to it back in 2019, I might have been more excited and more anticipatory of this series than I was. But it was clear to me after watching some of the first trailers that dropped, I'm like, ooh, this looks pretty damn good. And I have to say, after seeing, now, truth be told, I'm not even done watching them yet. I'm halfway through. I had to stop after episode 5. Not because I am not going to finish it, just because I was that, well, let's say, I think episode 5, and I was even warned about episode 5 by one of the producers of the show, said, wait till you get to episode 5. Boy, they weren't kidding. And it's funny to talk about this show. For those of you who don't know, Derek Chauvin, the verdict came in on the Derek Chauvin case. He was found guilty of murder and manslaughter, all 3 counts. So on this day and age, in this today, whatever you want to call it, justice was served. Anyway, so I found this to be all very, very interesting. So what has come up, though, is this show has now become a lightning rod. A lot of people don't think it's a good thing this show got made. And a lot of people are saying, maybe this show crosses a line and it is exploitative of black pain. And I'm like thinking to myself, once again, the forces out there who don't like horror. I mean, this show was billed as a horror story, a relentless horror story about a black family facing the horrors of America, and at the same time, the external horrors of America, and at the same time, supernatural horrors in their house. It takes both kinds of horror and puts them together in an unrelenting onslaught of, well, for me, dread, the likes of which I haven't seen a lot in my life. And what's so crazy about this show, like Stanley Kubrick's The Shining, a lot of the horror takes place in broad daylight. I mean, my God, this show, I don't want to oversell it, but it's pretty fucking good. And it's unlike anything that I've seen in a long time. And I think that there's a new subgenre of horror. I don't know if you want to call it black terror. Somebody else is going to have to name this. But, we saw it, of course, with Jordan Peele's Get Out. Then we saw it with Us. Now we're seeing it here with this. And I think there's the idea that we're taking the Black experience of America and turning it into great genre programming, in my mind, is exactly what we want. Isn't that what we're asking for? I know it's what I want. I want great stories that I've not heard before told by new creators. Well, Little Marvin is exactly that. He exemplifies to me the kind of creator I want to hear from. A new Black voice out there making a TV show that's once again touching on something, the Great Migration, I didn't know much about, and turning it into something, wow, that I haven't seen before. And so, man, I am excited for it. Now, a couple articles I want to read. Script Mag magazine, Sadie Dean interviewed Little Marvin, and I wanted to read a little bit of that interview. And let me put up this picture of Little Marvin so you know who you're hearing from. This Little Marvin talks to Sadie Dean, and that's scriptmag.com, and this was published in early April. Sadie Dean says, "Tell us about your screenwriting journey. What was the spark that made you decide to become a storyteller?" Little Marvin says, "Where do I begin? I would say, well, I wanted this for a long time. I mean, I love the theme of television, and I've been obsessed with it since I was a child. TV was an event in our household. I don't know what that says about me or my therapy bill," laughs. "So I've always wanted this, and when I graduated from college, in my early 20s, I pursued it with some vigor, but not enough. I think I got really beat down in my 20s, and when the going got tough, I ran, which is not the best way to have a career. But fast forward to a few years, and I was a marketing executive and a creative director for many years. I loved my life in the kind of corporate world, but there was always this nagging dream that I wanted to make television and I wanted to be a writer. So I did what I would suggest nobody do. I put myself up for promotion, and no one asked me to have, which bosses love, by the way. And if I got the gig, I would forget about my dream of being a screenwriter and just do this because it was meant to be. Or if I didn't get it, I would quit my job immediately, fly to Los Angeles, and not put myself out of my room until I was a paid writer. Spoiler, I didn't get the job. I did exactly that." Sadie, the interviewer, laughs. "Well, I'm happy that's the case. Are there any filmmakers or screenwriters that have inspired your work?" Little Marvin says, "There's so many to tell. I mean, I was the guy who would lock myself in the Academy Library. I would write from like 9 a.m. to noon. It's a fantastic resource for writers in Los Angeles." He's talking about the Motion Picture Academy Library, which you can go to, anybody can go to. "I would write from like 9 a.m. to noon. It's a fantastic resource for writers in Los Angeles. There's a tremendous resource, and I would read, Patty Chayefsky's Network. Any day where I felt like I was actually good, I would read Patty Chayefsky. Not someone who's a slouch. And if you're going to read somebody who's a great playwright and a great screenwriter, Patty Chayefsky is that. Oh, right, I'm a total hack, and then I would go back to work, but too many to count, especially the directors Brian De Palma, Stanley Kubrick, William Friedkin. There are too many to name. Yeah, I can definitely sense where you just naming off those directors and Patty Chayefsky, I can see those influences in this anthology series. So what inspired you to tell this story specifically?" There were a few things that I was waking up to every morning, and I was sort of opening my phone and seeing video after video of black folks being terrorized in some way by the police or surveilled or watched or harassed. And I started to think about my own experiences with that kind of terror and with that gaze, but also a history of that gaze that stretches all the way back to the dawn of this country. For black folks, public spaces have been weaponized against black folks since the dawn of the country. What I hadn't seen was the sort of tension between the public and the private, and that the most private of spaces, the home. So I wanted to focus on that and tell a terror tale, but rooted in the home ownership story. Sadie says, "You do an incredible job in layering in those different real-life issues, the turmoil and the racism, mental illness, PTSD, and then you still find a way to balance it with this very tight-knit family and the love that they have, but you also manage to keep us on the edge of our seats with the suspense, which is also greatly handled, especially in that pilot. I think it's very rare that you watch a pilot and you're like, okay, I'm ready for the full ride. No. By the way, my editorializing would be no. If you've seen the pilot, you are not ready for the full ride. You have no idea what's coming for you. Was suspense initially on the page, or was that something you created on set and through post while editing? Little Marvin, oh yeah, it evolves, and I think it begins on the page, of course, but other people get involved, right, and then your dream and the thing becomes even bigger. I mean, that's what kept happening. Like, I thought my dream was big, and then suddenly the actors walk in, and you're like, oh, wait, there's their dreams and their collective vision and what they'll bring to it, and then you realize that you're actually writing a show as a showrunner, and the thing I love about this job is that you're writing the show with every single thing you touch, right? So it's like the casting, you're writing a piece of it. The costume design, I have to say, I have to call out Mari and Keo, our costume designer, and Tom Hammock, our production designer, both brilliant and insanely gifted and crazy, and like they would work in tandem, so that you see a frame where it looks like a dress and a piece of wallpaper kind of connect. It's not by accident. We really sort of tried to write the show with every single frame, and then the edit is really just that next evolution, and I think I enjoyed the editing process as much as the writing process because you get the opportunity to write the show again in the edit. First of all, I don't know Little Marvin. I haven't met him, but based on his comments here and based on his show, he gets it, so kudos to you, sir. And when you're talking about working with your collaborators, that's exactly what makes great entertainment. When the showrunner or the person in charge understands that your production designer, your costume designer, your actors are all bringing their ingredients to that heady mix. And if you know what you're doing, it's that collaboration between everybody. If you're all on the same page, that creates awesomeness. Or in the case of this show, something really fucked up, and I'm there for that. Here's the interview with Mr. Marvin. But then, of course, then, now that the show is out, there's been a lot of articles that people are, after watching this show, they were not unexpected. This article from the Los Angeles Times was published by Greg Braxton on April 9th, 2021. The racist violence in Amazon's new series left execs shaken. Does it go too far? Now, I'm only going to read a little bit about this because I don't want to mess with I don't want to spoil this show for you. The sun shines brightly on the handsome homes and pristine lawns lining Palmer Drive in Compton, but a closer look reveals that it's anything but a beautiful day in the neighborhood. Strung up in front of the home newly occupied by the Emery family are pickaninny dolls, the dominant historical caricature of black children. The N-word has been burned into the front lawn. The symbols come courtesy of local white residents, a message to the newcomers, the only black family on the block, that they are not welcome. The plight of the Emery family is at the center of Amazon's new anthology series, Them, partly inspired by the Great Migration, when millions of black families oppressed by the racism of the Jim Crow South relocated to the West, Northwest, and Midwest. Set in 1953, the series follows the fictional Emerys, who have journeyed from North Carolina to settle in Compton. Henry Emery and his wife Lucky and their two young daughters have more to fear than hostile neighbors. They're locked in a deadly battle with supernatural forces, putting a sinister twist on the familiar refrain, "There's no place like home." The 10-episode first season, subtitled Covenant, follows other high-profile mashups of the country's troubled history of race relations and genre elements. Like last year's Emmy winner Watchmen, its HBO counterpart Lovecraft Country, and Hulu's Antebellum, Them features horrific scenarios of black people being attacked, images that remain highly resonant with the national fervor surrounding police brutality against black people and the resurgence of white supremacist groups. While much of the menace in Them comes from things that go bump in the night, the most shocking horror lies in some of its more realistic scenes of racist violence, which are arguably more disturbing than the vivid images in its recent predecessors. The mayhem gains momentum in the 5th episode, which depicts... I will not say what it depicts, but trust me, it's fucking horrifying. And In an effort to warn viewers, Amazon has included advisories along with commentaries from the cast and filmmakers. Still, the viciousness of the sequences, in particular the blah, 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 raises questions about whether the depiction of white supremacist savagery goes too far. Them creator and executive producer Little Marvin acknowledged that the violence is upsetting, but said it was necessary to illustrate the devastating effects of racism. Yes, there is a concern, but at the end of the day, I as an artist have to sit with myself and grapple with the authenticity of the show, he said. If I can sleep at night knowing this entire enterprise has an authenticity and integrity to it, then I'm good. I mean, I find it interesting to me that the history, like, if you make a movie like 12 Years a Slave and you see the horror of what it's like seeing a slave actually whipped, what that was actually like, but it's in a prestige project like 12 Years a Slave, oh, well then no one's complaining. They just recoil in horror at what was done. But you start to delve even further into the kind of violence that the black community who's lived in this country for over 400 years brought here in shackles, and slavery lasted centuries. Centuries. I mean, think about that. Slavery lasted longer than America was America. And when we go back and have to deal with, well, in the context of a horror show, God forbid somebody shows what the actual, horrors of living as a black person in the United States could have been like I mentioned yesterday. I mean, a black man was tied to the back of a truck and dragged until his body came apart. I mean, imagine if they showed that in this show. How far do you go? Well, as far as you have to tell the story that you need to tell. I find it interesting that people are like, oh, you can't do that. Oh, really? All of this happened in various forms. This show is reflecting the reality of life. It is a new voice in Little Marvin telling us a tale we have yet to hear. And I'm here for it. That's exactly what we want, isn't it? Oh, we don't really. Do we really want to real change requires us to actually look at something and to actually consider the reality of it. And like I said, that's what I'm for. Look, you know what? I think that a lot of the plight of people in this country, let's get to the root causes of things like poverty and education. We don't want to do that, but maybe it takes things like this to shake us out of our complacency so we actually solve the problems rather than just pay lip service to the problems. When are we going to go in and deal with real income inequality? When are we going to go in and deal with the results of what the welfare state has wrought since the 60s? Why aren't we spending a lot of money on teachers to educate people all over the country? I don't know. But the root causes of these things, racial inequality, we never deal with them. We never think about, oh, well, let's pay some teachers some real money. Let's get the best teachers into the most depressed areas of the country and give those people that have never had a leg up at least great education and great after-school programs. I mean, it's not hard. We know what the problems are. It's just we have the wherewithal to solve them because they're expensive and they require actual work to solve. But anyway, so this article in the LA Times, the executives and people are like, too much. Ooh, you've gone too far, Little Marvin. Really? Well, have you read any stories about what black people have endured in the history of this country? I mean, how much reality do you want to deal with? And I think that that's part of what makes this show great, is that it's pretty goddamn unflinching. And yes, it's horrific. Now, April 14th, New York Magazine. Well, actually, no, this is in Vulture, New York. Angelica Jade Bastien wrote an article. Them is pure degradation porn. In 2018, the artist Lorraine O'Grady said at a Brooklyn Museum book event, in the future, white supremacy will no longer need white people. That future is now. O'Grady's belief nods to the ways the structures of white supremacy are so ingrained in our culture that to exercise them goes far beyond reckoning with whiteness itself. But after watching Them, Amazon's latest horror anthology, it's in quotes in the article, horror anthology series, which dropped this past Friday, this quote came to mind for its distillation of the way people of color sometimes participate in their own degradation and in the systems that damage our lives, and in many cases, cut them heartbreakingly short. Them, showrun and created by Little Marvin and executive produced by Lena Waithe, is just rote, flagrantly biting the aesthetics of other filmmakers. It isn't just morally bankrupt. It isn't just grating in its empty platitudes and kiddie pool deep proclamations. I am comfortable calling it one of the most anti-black pieces of pop culture I've seen in the last few years. One that left me spent after the grueling process of watching its virulent imagery. In a stunning refutation to Hollywood's belief that representation behind and in front of the camera will fix its inherent racism. I'm not sure Hollywood can be saved no matter how many people of color it ropes into its machinations. Perhaps I should have known when, early in its first episode, it explains the Great Migration in text overlaying the screen, tipping its hand that it's not for black audiences at all, but everyone else. Isn't that what a great story is, though? It's for everyone. My God, lady, this show was created by a black creator who was admittedly influenced by William Friedkin and Brian De Palma, by his own admission, and Stanley Kubrick. I mean, it's unbelievable. So you're telling a black creator, and this is entirely his idea, that he's now somehow in league with whiteness? I mean, my God, where have we come? Give me a break. I know horror might not be for you, but these kinds of... It's unbelievable. Unbelievable. A black creator who's never had an opportunity to create a horror series before has an opportunity to create something very unique, and it goes for the fucking jugular, and you're going to talk about how they're supporting whiteness? What the fuck is wrong with everybody these days? I mean, seriously, give me a break. What, he can only make stories that you approve of? Stories that do what? What are the stories supposed to do? Not grab these things by the throat and scream in your face? Because maybe that's what needs to be done here. I mean, this thing, there's so much stuff going on in this show, and you write this fucking article. Fuck you. Fuck you, lady. I mean, my God. Anyway, let me go on. Spanning 10 days in 1953, Them follows the Emery family, Henry, an engineer, Lucky, the matriarch in the show's primary lens, and their two teenage daughters, Ruby and freshly school-aged Gracie. She's not teenage, by the way. As the journey from North Carolina to the lily-white suburban enclave of Compton, Los Angeles, a move that upends their lives from the jump, it is apparent how tricky it'll be to integrate themselves to their Compton neighbors. As the only black family on the block, they immediately cause a fury stoked by Betty Wendell, Allison Pill, I've never wanted to put a gun in the mouth of a villain and pull the trigger more than I want. I don't know what's going to happen at the end, but my God, do I hate her. She is awesome. Awesome. I love her in this show. God, I mean, between that and Devs, we'll forgive Picard. But my God, Allison Pill, you, my dear, are one hell of an actress. I don't think, not since Ramsay Bolton, have I wanted somebody on camera to die more than I want Allison Pill's character to die. Let me be clear. I'm not advocating real violence against the actress Allison Pill. I'm talking about how much I hate her character, which means they've done a great job, because you're supposed to. The picture of mid-century blonde Americana housewife who has an icy and distant relationship with her husband Clark. Her prim sense of propriety fails to hide the noxious racism she is more than proud to express, arguing about their birthright as white people, those whose fathers built the world. Racism is portrayed in a number of ways throughout the series. Gollywogs hanging from nooses along the Emery's porch curses, epithets, glares, redlining, ostracization, realty and banking scams. But the Emerys don't only have to contend with their viciously racist neighbors. There's also the matter of a haunting that started long before they arrived, one that warps their sense of self and besets them with great violence. Each member of the family deals with their own specific specter, like the monstrous tap-dancing blackface figure with pupilless black eyes that haunts Henry. But all the figures turn out to be visages of a singular entity. Well, I don't want, I don't want to, never mind. I don't want to spoil it. Little Marvin's thin cinematic resume becomes evident in the show's inability, as if you, lady, are like some paragon of cinematic knowledge. Little Marvin's thin cinematic resume. I mean, my God, this is his first show, man. And first time at bat, this is some incredibly accomplished stuff. And Little Marvin's thin cinematic resume becomes evident in the show's inability to make the most of its horror inspirations. Interviewed by Variety, the creator says, as a kid loving all those classic movies, folks who look like me never populated the center of those frames. Here's this classic Hitchcock frame that back in the day would have only held Janet Leigh or Eva Marie Saint or Grace Kelly. And instead, here's Deborah in the center of the frame, looking gorgeous, dazzling, and black. By the way, she is absolutely stunning. She's a beautiful, beautiful woman, which makes what happens to her even more disturbing. Little Marvin may see this as homage, but with the show's garish use of color, it is in love with washing a frame in cherry red. What, have you never seen a Dario Argento movie? Go back and watch Suspiria. I mean, come on, man. And its adherence to split diopter shots, as well as certain ostentatious camera movements, them is more jacking Hitchcock style than remixing it. Oh, wait a minute. So are you saying that Little Marvin is culturally appropriating Alfred Hitchcock? Jesus fucking Christ. What, you can't win with you people. And I mean you people, meaning you fucking idiots that are taking something that is clearly amazing, and you're now giving a creator, a black creator who's telling a very black story that he came up with, you're giving him a hard time because he might have watched Alfred Hitchcock. Which filmmaker hasn't? Give me a break. I mean, my God, have you watched a Tarantino movie? Of course you have. There's something insidious about Little Marvin's perspective in this quote. It supposes that putting a black person in a visually white concept is inherently radical, instead of showing the limits of his imagination. The aesthetic failures of them can't be untangled from its political ones, as the characters wrestle with Betty and their neighbors' attempts to get them out of the neighborhood, first with intimidation, then with outright violence. The directors of the show, most of whom are white men, often rely on displaying the white gaze in literal fashion. White creators glaring at the Emery family is one of the show's central visual tropes. Epithets like various epithets are spit from the lips of white people, emphasizing them's obsession with shoving the depravity of racism in extreme terms. Oh, really? As opposed to, I don't know, 12 Years a Slave? Watching Lupita Nyong'o victimized? I mean, what are you saying here? At the same time, it has nothing new to say about whiteness, how it works, how it perpetuates itself, how ingrained it is in our culture. Yes, sometimes racists are venomous. Other times they're passive. Sometimes they burn the... You know what? I'm not going to read the rest of this. It's amazing to me. It's amazing to me that you get a new black voice who... His work was so impressive that Amazon signed him up for not 1 but 2 seasons. He puts an incredible cast of black actors together, tells the story he wants to tell, and somehow it's too white, it's whatever it is, because it's disturbing. So, okay, I get it, lady. You can't take horror. You don't like this. But then suddenly you want to throw Why not just sit back and think to yourself, this is a horror tale I haven't seen before. And I would dare say we are watching an emerging genre. You know, before, when you would see black voices or black filmmakers, or, I mean, my friend Darren Scott and Rusty Cundiff, they just finished Tales from the Hood 3. You know, I'm fearful of what this woman would write about their work. What are you supposed to do when your horror skews too close to real life? It's not enough. I don't understand, man. I do not get it. I do not get it. You're damned if you do, damned if you don't. You know? I'm not going to read this. There's a lot of this. But I'm going to read the end. I couldn't help but think about the material effect on black folks of watching such violence in life and on screen. When we're being confronted by news stories like that of the killing by police of 20-year-old father Dante Wright in Minnesota, watching them feels like compounded trauma. It doesn't induce empathy or the desire for abolition in white folks. Really? Really? Doesn't? I'll tell you one thing, after episode 1 of this, I was certainly ashamed to be a white folk. Let me tell you. It doesn't induce empathy or the desire for abolition in white folks. It doesn't force others to consider the anti-blackness they perpetuate. If anything, it lets modern white people off the hook, providing extremes with which they can distance themselves from their own racism. Is it? Why are you telling me how I'm feeling? Why are you making these kinds of claims about what... I think this does exactly what a great horror film like The Exorcist does. It makes you think. It makes you think. And you know what? You're telling me how this is making me feel in this article? Who the fuck are you, lady? Who the fuck are you? Who? Don't tell me how a great horror television series is going to make me feel. And don't tell me how it's going to make a bunch of other people feel either. It doesn't force others to consider the anti-blackness they perpetuate. If anything, it lets modern white people off the hook, providing extremes with which they can distance themselves from their own racism. Little Marvin and Lena Waithe, like far too many black creators in the industry, are not interested in challenging the status quo. They're now a part of it. In doing so, they are cravenly using black pain to line their pockets. Wow. Wow. Well, I'll tell you, if you want to tell black creators what they can and can't address in their work, I'm sure they would love to hear from you. Why don't you call Little Marvin and offer to be a consultant on the second season of Them? Because clearly you're tapped into the zeitgeist. You speak for all of Black America, I guess. Or better yet, you speak for all people everywhere because you seem to know exactly what we're going to take away from the entertainment that we watch. You're the worst kind of person. You're the kind of person that would get rid of anything that you don't deem exactly the way you think it should be. You are the worst kind of critic. And it's people like you that are keeping us in a perpetual state of infantilization. You should grow up. You should open your mind. You should understand this is a fucking horror television show. That's what it was made to be. And that's what it is. It is not here to solve the social ills of everything that's happening in our society. It's a fucking horror show. And you know what? It does a great job of being that. It is not a crusading show. It certainly touches on a lot of issues that we could all learn from, but fucking A, give me a break. It's a horror show. That's what it's supposed to be. And it's a very, very good one. Man, oh man, oh man. The more things change, the more they stay the fucking same. I'll tell you. I didn't want to end, though, here because I did, in fact, want to read something else. This is from Cinema Express. The Indian, meaning East India, the Cinema Express. And I'm going to get this name wrong, but it was written on April 16th. Bhuvendish Chandar wrote this article. Them is shockingly, relentlessly horrific, but brilliant. Them is relentlessly brutal to both its characters and the audience. From its theme to the mise-en-scène, everything about Them necessitates a trigger warning. It has racial commentary, racial abuse, sexual assault, mental health crisis, PTSD, self-harm, violence, I don't want to say that, and maltreatment of psychiatric patients. And then it talks about the plot, which I don't want to give away. Them is eerie right from the onset. The best thing about Them is its solid conflict. It is usual for the audience to ask the residents of a haunted house to just leave the place, but it is trickier here. The Emerys have shelled out all their savings to buy this house, and both Lucky and Henry are in it for the long haul. Enough running, they assure each other. It gets to a point where we wish for the real estate agent to just pay back the money and let the family go. Them also takes a deeper dive into the issue. We realize the conspiracy behind the sale of the house and how the real estate agents of the time used black people to drive up the value of plots elsewhere. From episode 2 onwards, we realize the situation is simply too bleak. Both Henry and Lucky are haunted by their past traumas. Them is not just a story of the emancipation of black people in the U.S., but it also takes a look back at how black soldiers were treated during the war, much like the Winter Soldier does, and the mental repercussions of the same. While Henry, a veteran, battles PTSD, Lucky's trauma emanates from an incident that happens during Henry's absence. Another thing that makes Them stand out is how all the characters, including the neighbors and the supernatural ones, have a definite character arc. Lucky is the first to sense the spookiness in the house. Neither Henry nor his daughters believe her, and they even question her sanity. In their defense, they have trials of their own to deal with. Henry struggles to focus on his job as an engineer, as he is torn between the burden of everything going on and a nitpicky, authoritative, bigoted boss. Ruby gets bullied at high school and establishes a bond with an imaginary friend. Even little Gracie is not spared. I won't say why. Betty has a lot of issues too. I don't want to ruin anything, so I'm skipping through this. All characters go through hell, and worse, so do we, the audience, who are witness to all this, to get where they stand in the final episode. It's not just the writing of Them that is impressive. Other departments, like cinematography, editing, and coloring, are also commendable, and the visuals are astounding. Them takes what Jordan Peele's Us and Get Out did and elevates their central themes by multiple levels. It leaves us with a lingering thought. Humans can be as evil as the devil, and even manifestations of evil can have some humanness in their dark corners. Amen. So anyway, that's what I wanted to talk about. Once again, horror up for grabs. People, being offended and deciding that, wait a minute, a horror television show can't just be a horror television show by an emerging new creator, a black creator who has chosen to tell a story that shines a light on the black experience unlike one has ever been shown before. But according to people, that's not enough. That's not enough. Well, little Marvin, let me tell you, I understand why you look so happy in this picture. Because you, sir, have done, as Gaff said at the end of Blade Runner, a man's job. You have done something that I have to commend you for. You've made me scared, and you've given me something I haven't seen before, and kudos to you for doing it. Because I'll tell you one thing, since I started watching your show, I haven't stopped thinking about everything that you've presented me in it. And that's all a great creator of motion pictures and television can hope for. Thank you. Now, let's see. What does everyone else have to say? Let me jump into the letters. Who is up first? William La Rochelle is up first. William La Rochelle says, "Hi, R&B and the PGS. This is a thought I had written in longhand and procrastinated about typing up, so it refers to an episode in the rear view. This will be the very short version because I don't have those pages to transcribe at the moment, maybe for the best. Regarding the terms fan entitlement and toxic fandom, what gets lost is that these were never introduced into the discourse by the fans themselves or the customer base." Ooh, interesting. You're absolutely right. "When we use these terms, we're participating in a sort of corporate spin. We're drinking the Kool-Aid or the new Coke we didn't like that led to Coca-Cola Classic in the 80s when the replacement of cane sugar with corn syrup needed subterfuge. I'm not sure if I ever heard these terms, let alone neck-bearded, fedora-wearing incels living in their mother's basement, until it came from the likes of the 2016 Ghostbusters cast and crew, as well as some well-liked talk show hosts who need to maintain access. I did notice at the time a 50-something hirsute gentleman with a fedora get off a streetcar and head to the cinema for Feigbusters the day I was going into the theater for something else, to be fair. I remember the scandal of Sony, or whoever was in charge of the comments under the Ghostbusters 2016 first trailer, curating the comments so that reasonable concerns were removed, leaving only the most childish, racist, and profane remarks to supposedly represent the dissenting voice. This was well documented and tracked by some vigilant YouTubers at the time with screen grabs and counts of likes, dislikes, and comments. Yet, this is still all but buried in the narrative of where the concept of toxic fandom comes from. We don't owe anything to the original fans, quote, may or may not be a valid statement. However certain it is to inflame indignation. The plan seems to be A, take an IP that has value because of its built-in fan base, and B, deliberately do something with it that will provide backlash, and C, deflect the predicted backlash by throwing shade on all who criticize the new product. Rinse, dry, repeat. Some of us are occasionally disgruntled customers, and the more we learn about the hows and whys of a movie or show seeming off, I say it is natural to beat the drum in some small way to make whatever meager noise we can to say Twitter stands don't represent the audience at large, nor do those who prioritize the mirage of safe space. We just want good movies. I'll see Dune and Spielberg's West Side Story, and I genuinely root for Jason Reitman's Ghostbusters Afterlife to have enough cinema screens to be considered a hit. For the most part, even with Indiana Jones 5, I might wait to get the all clear from the Fandom Menace pundits and yourself. I might only hope that Sala is in this one. I would be reaching to imagine Mark Hamill taking over the Marshall College position previously held by Jim Broadbent and Denholm Elliott, but I admit I'm a terrible consumer. I really only liked Rogue One in the Disney era, and that's the only new Star Wars movie I don't have on Blu-ray or even DVD. I've seen them all twice in the cinema and then bought them as part of a battered denial phase. Now they're all coasters. I may refuse to see Indy 5 and then unconsciously find my body drifting into a theater on opening day like a zombie with nobody to blame but myself. Will be there an item on the screen that match dissolves with the Magic Kingdom castle instead of a mountain? Oh, God, you know what? I didn't even think about that. Ugh. That's how low the bar might well be by then. I found a bunch of DVDs I'd thought lost for a couple of years, oddly tucked into a bag that protected my one long box of comics. Rewatching Iron Man can be a blast from the world of 2008, which should not be so different from today. Great movie. Tropic Thunder should be shown in schools just to weed out the hypersensitive. I think for me, being a fan is to revere something that already exists, and it stops at that. I love one out of the 3 Star Wars trilogies. The paradox of fandom is that the more you know of a film or a person or a band, the more contradictions or lies or flaws you might know. But it would take too much energy to be truly toxic. I know I sure don't need anyone's permission to say whether I like a film, a show, or what's been said by a studio executive. I will most likely quietly celebrate when heads eventually roll, but it will be less out of hate and more out of relief and a respect for justice and for well-made entertainment. Anyway, thanks. William La Rochelle. Pretty good letter. I really enjoy that. You know, I mean, you just never know where these things come from. I think what's been forgotten, and I've said it a lot on the show, is the impulse for why things were made. And to me, there's only 2 different kinds of movies. One, all movies are product. They are made to hopefully make money. That's it. However, obviously, telling stories is, and the world that comes with Hollywood can be far more interesting to people and more glamorous and more fun than, say, working a Wall Street hedge fund. Although I would dare say working on a Wall Street hedge fund, you can make a lot more money than you can in Hollywood. But I understand the appeal. That's why I've been here for 30 plus years, trying to eke out a meager existence. But yeah, all we want is good product. The difference is the studios, the corporate powers, it used to be that they would bet on creators. Of course, the creators would have to have some kind of, either you'd have the gut response from a Louis B. Mayer or somebody like that who would say, or Alan Ladd Jr., who, for whatever reason, believed in George Lucas to make Star Wars. Luckily, that worked out because George Lucas had a lot of great creators, but it could have gone either way. And look where we are now. Now there is no creator, so nowadays we have the studios making decisions that find the creators because they're only creating product. Movies used to be the collision of maverick dreamers and filmmakers with the corporate interests or with the studio interests. And the studios needed the creators, and they knew they needed the creators. But unfortunately, things are different now. The creators are a pain in the ass. And if you could get some AI to write and direct a movie, they probably would. But then it wouldn't be the same, would it? I mean, the truth of things, like Little Marvin's series, Them, it's the creators themselves. It's the filmmakers and their collaborators that make television shows and movies worth watching. Unfortunately, there's less and less of that because the corporate world, corporations can't bet on things. They need to mitigate their risks. They're the most risk-averse, corporations by definition are the most risk-averse places in the world. They're not going to be mavericks that take risks on new filmmakers. What? What if it fails? Then the person that took the risk they might lose their job, they might lose their position in the entire entertainment business. So, unfortunately, what happens is, like with Star Wars, like it or not, Star Wars was really the product of one man, George Lucas, and his collaborators, but it was George Lucas at the top. And I would say that George Lucas as a human being probably has been living in a bubble too long. That's why we got the life he led. You think George Lucas can even go to a restaurant or even go to a 7-Eleven and buy a fucking Slurpee without, somebody, oh my God. There's a really funny video that I saw the other day on YouTube. I don't even know what it was for, but it was shot in Chicago, where I guess George Lucas lives now. And some guy is walking down the street and he's talking about something completely unrelated. And George Lucas walks behind him. He's wearing a blue and white plaid shirt and jeans. Walks behind him, kind of looks into the camera. Oh, they're filming something, and realizes, oh, they're not filming me. They're filming something totally different. And he just kind of goes on his merry way and into the store. And I love that. I'm like, God bless George Lucas. He can now go out into the wild and not worry about it. And he's in Chicago, and I'm sure most people don't. He gets recognized, but probably most people don't recognize him. He's just a dude in a plaid shirt and jeans with a beard on, walking into a store. And the thing is, we need those people. We need David Brown saying to Steven Spielberg when they're making Jaws, dude, just keep making your movie. Don't stop shooting. Just keep making the movie. I mean, God bless David Brown. Rest in peace, sir. But he was the producer of Jaws, one of the producers. And I think it was Zanuck. It was Daryl Zanuck and David Brown, right? And Spielberg made Jaws. And that's what we love. We love Spielberg's imagination. We love our filmmakers' imaginations. And that's what we want. The problem with all this corporate entertainment is there's not one person behind it anymore. And that's what we're missing. And that's why I can say I want to see young Mr. Reitman's Ghostbusters Afterlife movie. Why? Because he got to make the movie in the wake of failure. They're like, couldn't be any worse. Go make the movie you want to make. You are Ivan Reitman's son. You've made some great movies. All movies and television need to come from a specific place, and that place is not from corporate on up high. The best movies will never be made with that kind of corporate, and I don't think that Kevin Feige, sure, Marvel Studios, But Marvel Studios is Marvel Studios. They're doing their own thing. Do you think that Disney, if they had their druthers, do you think that Bob Iger or Bob Chapek would have been like, wow, you should make Falcon and the Winter Soldier exactly as it's written? Because, wow, there's nothing here that we're going to have a problem with. Never would have happened. So, God bless Marvel Studios, because they're getting away with a hell of a lot. Pasty Coppertop writes in. Pasty Coppertop says, hello, RMB. Thanks again for all the wonderful... thanks again to all for the wonderful Zoom call again. Not sure how you have time for all this stuff, but it's awesome. Well, thank you. Unlike others who believe all is doom and gloom in the future of film, I think there's a lot to look forward to, as do I. All will be okay, folks. Just try and step back and be positive for a change. Everything will work out. I think you do a good job of speaking out about the negatives of Hollywood, but you also celebrate the positives, and I appreciate that. Goddamn right. Like them. I wish we didn't have to speak so much about the negatives and these stupid things out there in the film world, but they're there. You state your opinion and pretty much move on. Well, except for Star Trek. That's written there. That's not my editorializing. I enjoy Falcon and Winter Soldier. The Grunwald run on Cap was on par with Brubaker's as my favorite. I may be a bit biased because Captain America and Winter Soldier are two of my favorite characters, so I was looking forward to the show and seeing a deeper story about the Winter Soldier. It hasn't quite gotten to the darkness I was hoping for with Bucky, but it is still enjoyable. I figured it would be centered around Falcon, and I'm good with that. Is the show a bit heavy-handed with some of the themes? Yes. But who cares? It's a truthful narrative about America's past in terms of treatment of black Americans. It sucks, but that was our past, and now we must learn from it and move to a better future. The measure of a man or woman is their actions and not the color of their skin or sexuality or whatever label segregates someone. I was stoked to hear about your love of the Gundam world. Do you read the trade paperbacks? I'm a few issues in the Thunderbolt series and love it. Also, do you paint any of your models? Thanks again, RMB Kevin. Oh, and can our world quit using the term Nas so loosely or freely? I think because of the depiction of many on film and TV, people think they know what these villains were like. Only those who live the horrors really know how bad they were. Just because you have a different opinion doesn't mean you are one of them. People, stop the name calling. It makes you sound ignorant. I agree. I have not read Gundam comics. I've read the novel, but I have not read the comics. And yeah, I paint my Gundam models. I think obviously I don't. You know what? I haven't painted all of them. Sometimes I won't. If I don't paint them, I do like to hit them with a flat coat and then do some dry brushing and maybe some panel line work. I think they always look better when you do that. I tell you, though, I'm really looking forward to getting the new Perfect Grain RX-782 because that thing is epic. And I just watched Genix paint video on painting that model, and oh my God, he did such a good job. Changed the color scheme, blue instead of red. Oh, it's dope. Well, thanks for that letter, Pasty. I agree with you. Appreciate that, and thanks for the kind words. Mike F. writes in. Hi, Rob, into the Post-Geek Singularity. No, I've still not seen the Concorde Airport 79, but I have already seen the first 30 minutes, and then something came up, so I have to stop watching. But don't worry, Rob. I will still watch it in full soon and send you a letter of my review. But let me tell you, based on the first 30 minutes, I see what you mean now, laugh out loud. Anyways, I'm sending you a letter to share my Oscar predictions. The Oscars is coming this weekend, and yes, it's going to be very different because for obvious reasons, which I won't state because you all know what that is. But the Oscars is happening, and they're going to honor the best film in the year 2020. Let's start with my prediction for Best Picture. Nomadland is currently the front runner. They've been winning every single award out there, and I don't think anything can stop them unless it'll be like La La Land, where they'll win every single Best Picture award and then lose it at the Oscars. But I don't think it will happen to Nomadland. I think they have it, although I wouldn't say it is 100%. But still, I'm predicting Nomadland to win Best Picture. The other possible alternatives I see is Promising Young Woman or The Trial of the Chicago 7. Best Director? No more discussions needed. Chloe Zhao for Nomadland. She's been winning every single directing award out there, including the DGA. Chloe has it in the bag. She'll make history this weekend. I don't see any possibility of an upset. Best Actor? I want to say Chadwick Boseman for Ma Rainey's Black Bottom. He was great. He has won a Golden Globe, Critics' Choice, and SAG Award, but he lost the BAFTA to Anthony Hopkins for The Father. I'm predicting Chadwick Boseman to win, but I'm now seeing the possibility of an Anthony Hopkins upset since The Father is now available on VOD and everyone has finally watched it and they all love it. The whispers that I'm hearing is that it's going to be a close fight between Boseman and Hopkins because it turns out there's a lot of passion for Hopkins, but whoever wins between them, I wouldn't be upset. They'll both deserve it. Best Actress. This is the hardest category to predict. It's just too all over the place. Andra Day won the Golden Globe. Carey Mulligan won the Critics' Choice. Viola Davis won SAG. Frances McDormand won the BAFTA. I think we can say that any of these four could win. I'm having a tough time predicting it. There seems to be a passion for Carey Mulligan, and she is considered as the front runner by some pundits. But I'm going to go out on a limb and predict Viola Davis for Ma Rainey's Black Bottom. It's all because of her SAG win, and remember, there's a huge correlation between SAG and Oscar voters. Plus, Davis has won before for supporting, and they might want to award her for a lead this time around. She fucking ruled, too. So my prediction will be Viola Davis, but I might change my mind up to the last minute because how all over the place this category is. But whoever wins, they will deserve it because of all the nominees here giving fantastic performances. Best Supporting Actor. I don't need to discuss this any further because Daniel Kaluuya for Judas and the Black Messiah has this in the bag. He will win. Best Supporting Actress. The frontrunner here is Yong Yoo-jung for Minari. Predicting her. She won SAG and BAFTA, which are both industry awards. I think she's 90% a lock to win this, and it seems like everyone loves her. She's been campaigning everywhere, and if she wins, she'll deserve it. The only threat for her win is Maria Bakalova for Borat's subsequent movie film. There's also passion for her performance. I'm predicting Yoon, but Bakalova will be my alternative. Poor Glenn Close, though. It's her 8th nomination, and she's highly likely to lose yet again. Best Original Screenplay, I'm predicting Promising Young Woman. I think Emerald Fennell is 95% locked to win this. She won the Critics' Choice, the WGA, and the BAFTA. If there's an alternative, maybe Aaron Sorkin for The Trial of the Chicago 7. But there's a huge passion for Promising Young Woman, and I think Fennell has this award in the bag. Best Adapted Screenplay, I see this as a competition between Nomadland and The Father. Nomadland won Critics' Choice, while The Father won the BAFTA. None of them won the WGA since they weren't eligible, which led to Borat's subsequent movie film winning it. Right now, I'm predicting Nomadland because I think they'll reward Chloe Zhao all the way. The only hurdle is that Nomadland is not a dialogue-heavy film, unlike The Father. Some voters might be reluctant to vote because of that. I think Nomadland can prevail, but watch out for The Father. For the rest of the categories, Best Animated Feature Film, Soul. I think there's no doubt about that. I agree. Best International Feature Film, Another Round. They'll finally give Thomas Vinterberg some love. Original Score, Soul. Best Original Song, Speak Now from One Night in Miami, although watch out for Lo Si from The Life Ahead, which is, by the way, co-written by long overdue Diane Warren, or Husavik from Eurovision Song Contest. Best Sound, Sound of Metal. Best Production Design, Mank. I mean, look at the way they recreated 30s Hollywood. That already makes it a lock to win. Best Cinematography, Nomadland. Best Makeup and Hairstyling, Ma Rainey's Black Bottom. Best Costume Design, also Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, in which the legendary Ann Roth is the costume designer. Best Film Editing, The Trial of the Chicago 7 or The Sound of Metal. Best Visual Effects, Tenet or The Midnight Sky. This is my Oscar prediction for this year. I wrote this on Tuesday, so I might change my mind in some categories up to the last minute. Anyways, what are your thoughts, Rob? Do you agree with my predictions? Do you also have your own predictions? That's all for now. Thanks, Rob. And stay metal. P.S. I'm open to appear on Midnight Metal if you'd ever like to invite me. Well, Mike, why not? We had random people. All I'm going to say for Midnight Metal is I think that I might make it a permanent show with Dave Parker. But we like the idea of bringing on random people. We're also going to have guests that we line up. But Midnight Metal is a pretty damn good show. And I think it's a lot of fun. So we'll see. Yeah. This one comes from... Oh, you know what? Black Philip Alvarez, but he even asks, he says, "Greetings, Rob, and my fellow Post-Geek community. Back again with a letter I hope is the very first one read on Midnight Metal." All right. Well, Black Philip Alvarez, you have your wish. Absolutely. This is an interesting letter. Omar94 writes in, "Hi, Rob, moderators in the Post-Geek Singularity. COVID-19 causing movies to COVID-19 causing movies to take longer to make got me thinking about something when it comes to the production of films. Movies, particularly big budgeted ones, take a while to make, but it's always really impressive when they are made in a shorter period of time than usual and actually end up being really good. There were two movies in particular which came to mind when I was thinking about this. They don't actually have to do with COVID, but I still found it very impressive how they were made in a really short period of time, despite the fact there were circumstances which would typically cause a movie to take longer pulling off. Terminator 2 ended up being really good and better than the first Terminator, in my opinion, and James Cameron, who's known for going over budget and over schedule with his movies, pulled it off as it was made in 9 months, despite the fact it had a record high budget and it was breaking new ground in special effects. Well, you just answered your own question. It was the first $100 million movie, which is how they were able to pull that off. They probably had people going 24/7. Toy Story 2 is really good and better than the first Toy Story, in my opinion, and John Lasseter and the Pixar team pulled it off, as the whole movie was also made in 9 months, even though animated movies typically take 4 years to make. I know it takes a long time to make movies, but I'm always impressed when they are made really quick and are actually really good. Thanks, and live long and prosper. Well, I think you picked the one thing about movies. In your case, what you just picked, you had James Cameron, who's a world-class filmmaker, who was given the biggest budget that anyone had ever been given, so he was able to pull it off, and so is everybody else. I mean, everybody, it's either cheap, fast, or good. The rule is in Hollywood, it's cheap, fast, or good. You get to only pick two of those. So it can be cheap and good, or it can be fast and cheap, but it won't be good. It all depends. Depends what you're using. So what happens is, and Pixar had a team in place. They'd made a lot of movies. They really understand what they're trying to do. They probably had batted around stories and had ideas for sequences and maybe an idea for the film. So once they got the green light, they were able to, let's call it, rapidly prototype it in terms of using a newer phrase. That's why they were able to do that. I mean, if you have a lot of money, you can do a lot of things quick, because you can have multiple people working at the same time. You can have them working in 24-hour shifts if you need be. Money solves most problems. It doesn't make you talented, but it certainly solves production issues. So that's why movies don't necessarily always take as long. That's kind of where I would say that is all. That's where we're at. So let's see where we are at with everybody. Everybody here. What are you guys saying after my rant? I bet I scared. There's not a whole lot of people watching this stream, so I guess I scared people away, or maybe they haven't seen the show. Either way, I like doing this. Julius Goodwin, the official sommelier of this channel, says, I admit I'm kind of disappointed you missed me on Midnight Metal a few days ago. I was looking forward to rocking out with you and the guys, and of course, hardcore headbanger Miss Elizabeth. I also think Lovecraft Country equals Them as a series. Well, I'll have to wait till I get to the end of Them, but I think they're both. I mean, I think we're seeing an emerging genre of black filmmakers who are making things that are steeped in black history, being a huge component of their film. I mean, even Damon Lindelof making Watchmen. It's all part of, I think, an interesting new emerging genre that I really, really like. I think it's fantastic. Hopefully we'll see you this week on Midnight Metal. Circus of 5 sends in a tip and says, I can imagine how uncomfortable Caucasians feel watching them. Dude, let me tell you, I wanted to crawl out of my fucking white skin watching that first episode. Oh my God. Yes. As a black man, I felt uncomfortable watching them, having experienced in one lifetime most of the degradations them portrays. The horror genre seems a perfect way to communicate this dread. Thank you. I agree. And that's what makes it great, is that it does communicate the dread. I mean, I'm sitting there watching this show like, not because I'm scared, because I dread. I feel the sense of dread. And it's hard to do that. Julius A. Goodwin sends in a tip and says, also, have you seen John Carpenter's Vampires? I've never been a fan of vampire flicks or even horror in general, but that one I enjoyed. James Woods gives a heck of a performance. I have to tell you, Julius, one of my favorite horror novels, and if I could go back and remake, I mean, they're trying to remake every other John Carpenter movie, but Vampires is based on a novel by John Stakely. Hold on a second. Well, I thought I had it here. I do have it. Vampires is one of my favorite pulp horror novels. I think the movie needed a much bigger budget, and I think John Carpenter was a little tired when he made it. I enjoy it, but I don't love it, and I would love to see somebody go back and readapt the movie. I really would. Fortunato sends in a super chat and says, I call this type of horror show race-sploitation. See, I just don't think that it is that. Sure, that's what it's about, but is it exploitation? I mean, exploitation movies are a moniker that's thrown on a whole slew of B films, but I think delving into our past to tell horror stories is something that's not unique to black filmmakers now. It's just black filmmakers are able to get away with it in a way that maybe white filmmakers couldn't or shouldn't. And I think that it's pretty amazing. And listen, for one, I'm telling you, I think it's great. And I think it's great stuff. And it's great stuff because it has a lot of reality in there, uncomfortable reality, and that's what makes horror great. You know, it's so funny to me. I mean, I'm like, God, what if that woman who wrote that article was going to talk about the rape revenge films like I Spit on Your Grave? My God, what would she have thought of that? Or the uncut version, the original Swedish version of They Call Her One Eye, or Thriller, A Cruel Picture, as they know it in that country. Thanks, Rob. Your heart is in the right place. I know a lot of the chat doesn't seem to like you addressing these subjects. Listen, this is a subject, Them is a cutting-edge horror show. It is an imagination connoisseur show par excellence. It's out there in the ether. People are writing op-ed pieces about how it shouldn't be seen, or, I mean, this is exactly what I want to deal with on Robservations. Now, yes, because it touches on race, but it touches on race in relation to a series. A series I think is pretty damn good. That's something that absolutely belongs here. I'm not talking about, I'm talking about these concepts within the confines of a show. That's what this show is about. I mean, if I talk about Star Trek, I shouldn't talk about Star Trek. I mean, it's the same thing. It just happens to be this show directly addresses race in a horror context, and I think it's all the richer and all the better for it. So, anyway, so Rob says, your heart is in the right place. I know a lot of the chat doesn't seem to like you addressing these subjects, but hopefully they'll actually listen and learn. The Post-Geek singularity should be an open-minded community, right? This isn't goobers and gobblers, after all. Is goobers and gobblers a thing? Is that a place that I don't know? But I agree with you. I mean, I would say, look, we're all mature adults here, and this is the kind of genre entertainment that doesn't come along. And look, am I saying that this is the greatest thing that's ever been made? No, but I think it's definitely a great example. I mean, we're living through a renaissance of horror right now, and I think that race exploitation, I'm uncomfortable with that, because I don't think utilizing the black experience and incorporating that into genres, whether it's science fiction, fantasy, or horror, is necessarily race exploitation. But it definitely, I mean, the black experience tells stories that I haven't encountered in this way before. So for me, as somebody who was born a white middle-class dude in Seattle, when I watch something like this, I'm learning, and I'm also experiencing the cringe factor of what it's like to be a white person watching this. So look, even though I dread every moment of this show because, oh my God, I never know what's going to happen next, I love the experience of watching this show because I love horror, and I love feeling true horror. And there's great exploitation elements in this show too. Trust me, I'm not a doctor, sends in a tip and says, trust me, black audiences love horror. Black people have been drawn to the horror genre for decades. The black horror fans love and get horror. Dude, I know. Like, that's why I used to love going to see the slasher movies with a predominantly black audience, because no one was enjoying those movies more than black audiences were. And because they were enjoying them so much, it made me enjoy them more. If I was by myself, those slasher movies, look, one of the greatest film-going experiences I ever had in my life was going to see Friday the 13th 3D at the Town Cinema in downtown Seattle. Let me tell you, that audience was predominantly black, and God bless every one of them that was in that audience, because that was one of the most fun experiences I have ever had in a movie theater. Ever. So I agree with you. Delonzo Edwards sends, well, Delonzo, thank you so very much. That's a very generous super chat, sir. Another YouTuber I recently watched complained about Falcon and the Winter Soldier being too woke because of dealing with race in America. SMH. You, sir, are very appreciated. It's hard to have these conversations today with non-blacks. I appreciate you saying so, Delonzo, and you've been very kind in that regard, but I'm like, I don't understand why. I do understand why, but in the context of great entertainment, especially genre entertainment has been traditionally a place, as I've mentioned before, whether it's The Outer Limits, Star Trek, or The Twilight Zone, where genre entertainment in the 60s was dealing with these very things because television standards and practices wouldn't let you attack these issues head on. And so doing it in a genre show is the perfect place to do it, and the whole point of Falcon and the Winter Soldier is the show is all about Sam Wilson discovering he's deserving of being the first black Captain America. It's his crucible. At first he thought he couldn't do it. He gave up the shield. But I think, through the course of the show, and Isaiah, of course, Bradley says, they're never going to let a black man be Captain America. Just like they were never going to let a black man be president. I'll tell you, it's so weird to me. There's a lot of people who have been coming after me, like on Twitter, and they're like saying things like, well, Rob, there was black slave traders who sold black people to the traders that brought them to America, as if that's equivalent somehow. Like the fact that slave traders happen to be black is somehow proof that, well, there's racism all over. Well, in Africa, as we all know, the predominant population of Africa at the time was black. So it's not like there were these incredible racial divides it was horrible that people were being sold into slavery, but it wasn't a racial issue. It was an economic issue back then. And by the way, black tribes have been killing each other in Africa and selling each other off for centuries, if not millennia. So it's not like this is some new thing that was happening. No, the experience is that when Europeans enslaved black folks and brought them to America, there was a whole different dynamic that was created. It's not the same. And everybody's throwing this whataboutism at me. And I'm like, well, it's not the same thing. Well, America elected a black president, so he must not be racist anymore. Give me a fucking break. Do you really believe that? Come on now. What happened today? The entire country was waiting on pins and needles, wondering, are we going to once again have another racial reckoning, or is justice going to be served? Well, thank God justice was served for once. For once. Black people can actually point to today's verdicts and say, you know what? A cop got his just desserts. And I think that's a good thing. And it's crazy, man. I really appeal. Appeal. Delonzo, I really appreciate your support of the channel, and I appreciate you saying that, because, man, it's like the same reality. It's like, okay, we have a predominantly African-American prison population. Why do we have this? Well, let's go look at the root causes. Family, education, poverty. Why don't we fix those problems? And then we won't have as much. But no, because no one wants to spend the kind of money it's going to take to really fix the problems. We educate our population. We get kids into after-school courses. We let them explore their own talents to find out what they might want to be. One good teacher that gets well paid, that's maybe in a very depressed or economically unsound environment. Towns need good teachers, but we don't put the good teachers there. The very places that we can make real change, that kids need it more than ever. Kids who have things don't have things because their families don't have things, or maybe there's only a mom, or maybe there's only a dad. Why aren't we paying money into those communities? It would solve a lot of our problems, but we don't want to do that. Where's the profit in it? Well, how about the long-term profit of making a more vibrant culture where there's less cause to, do all kinds of behavior that you don't want people to do? Give everybody opportunity. Everybody deserves opportunity. And nobody wants to deal with the root causes of these things. It drives me it's insane. That's why I'm always saying, you know what? If you treated the United States like a film, and if you looked at it all like, how are we going to make the United States functional and make our days? We would address things like income inequality. We would address things like education. We would fix infrastructure, and we would do all the things but we don't. There's no necessarily money in it, but we don't. I'm telling you, our society would be better if we did overall. Crazy. Edward Leinhardt says, critics, they're dying to get a chance to criticize the work of an artist. But she's not even criticizing the work just of an artist. She's telling everybody what they should believe, and she's condemning everybody. She's condemning not just little Marvin, she's condemning the entire audience for them, and she's condemning Amazon for giving them a venue to put it out on. I mean, my God, can you imagine the world that we would live in if she was able to be the final arbiter of what did and didn't get made? It's so weird to me. I mean, especially it's not designed to revolutionize the world. It's a horror show that happens to have some really cogent, very interesting social commentary that I think we all need to hear. And using social commentary to create terror, which is great. That's what I want to see in a horror show. Sheriff Carl says, I know you don't partake, but I'm off work and finally enjoying my 420. You know what? I appreciate the dankest nugs. I can. I'm just not somebody, weed has always sort of put me to sleep. I always get all mellow, man. I'm more of a stimulant guy. But what's the best stoner movie in your opinion, and what is the most wrecked you've ever been from weed? Personally, I think every movie benefits from weed. I raise my bong to the PGS. Ooh, that's a good question. I will say this. The most stoned I ever was in my entire life was at my friend Wayne Mogilevsky's house when we both lived at Kenmore. Kenmore, we called it the Kenmore Clubhouse. Kenmore was the street we lived on in Los Feliz. It was between Hollywood Boulevard and Franklin. I lived there for 5 years. And for whatever reason, we got so stoned, and they were showing back-to-back the $6 Million Man, Bionic Woman TV movies they'd made. I think the first one we watched was Bionic Breakdown. I got so stoned that I literally was remembering, and I hadn't thought about this since I saw it probably, from the time I was a kid watching the very first episode of the $6 Million Man that was ever broadcast. And there was this SWAT van painted white that was broadcasting the signal into this town. And there's a scene where Steve Austin pulls up it's not a fence post, but it's when they take a tin can, they fill it with cement and they have a wood post coming out of it. It was like that. And he pulls it out of the ground and he throws it at the SWAT van and it takes the SWAT van out. It was that, man. And I was literally flashing back. I'm like, oh my God, my childhood is all rushing back to me. That was the most stoned I ever was in my life. What's my favorite stoner movie? I don't know if it's such a stoner movie, but because people get high in it all the time, I would say Dazed and Confused, just because I love Dazed and Confused. I like it a lot. I know that's not a popular, that's probably the obvious choice, but that's the first thing that comes to mind, is Dazed and Confused, because I love it. MPAA, I see what you did there, says, it's easy for horror to find a target on its back. From Dr. Wordham burning down EC Comics to the MPAA chopping up 80s horror films, those who read Fangoria magazine back then look for scenes that were removed by censors and parents' groups, darn it. Look, as a horror fan my whole life, I lived through all that, all the censorship. I think the most disappointed I ever was when I saw at the John Dance Theater, I saw Friday the 13th Part 2, the same theater I saw Superman the movie, the giant John Dance Theater, but it was Paramount. They always got Paramount movies there. I saw Logan's Run there. I saw Superman the movie there. I saw Star Trek the Motion Picture there. I saw Friday the 13th Part 3D there. I saw Airplane there. Huge theater, and we were waiting for a lot of the gore that was promised, and we felt it was Friday the 13th Part 2 was trimmed, man. Trimmed. So yeah, horror fans want that. Though, tips $1 and says, I feel Faces of Death was actually exploitative. Not really my cup of stout. Yeah, I agree with you. It was, because it wasn't, I mean, it's like, here's real death. You know, some of it was fake, but we're supposed to believe it's, that isn't, to me, that's not great. I don't want to see real death and degradation. You know, I mean, horror is hope. I find horror movies cathartic because it allows me to realize that by sitting there, I'm staving off my own demise one more day. Stub McShave sends in a tip and says, I rewatched the making of videos of Mandalorian. It's a good thing that Favreau and Filoni are the showrunners. They complement each other and fulfill different roles. Favreau's enthusiastic and comes up with ideas. Filoni works as a filter and knows what works. Totally agree. I think they're a great team. I'm gonna get their name wrong. That I'm gonna get your name wrong because I heard your husband explain to me how to say it. It's Janusz. I want to say Januszewski, but it's wrong. So the Januszewski husband, which is our friend's husband, who I guess we haven't heard from yet. I started watching on my own today. Yay! I tuned in the middle of that first article rant. Having finished my certificate in diversity and inclusion studies, I get what degradation porn haters are getting at, but geez Louise, listen to Black Voices. Diversity and inclusion studies. I agree. Don't black creators get a chance to make something that's considered before they're being told that they're just supporting the white hegemony? I mean, this kind of thinking is so stupid. It's really dumb. You know, I'm tired of Robin DiAngelo, and I'm tired of all this. I mean, it's look, when I get up, I'll tell you something. Race in my life doesn't really play a big part. You know, I don't really think about it. I really don't. I do not get up. I'm trying to think about what projects can I get done, what needs to be delivered, where am I at, and how am I going to pay the rent or the house payment, how I'm going to whatever, you know, all those things. But yes, I agree with you. Listen to Black Voices. As a matter of fact, listen to them more, because if they're going to give us more shows like them, bring it on, son. Bring it on. Nick Parrish says, "What's up, Rob? I watched your video explaining the fictional history of John Walker, and I'm glad you did that, because articles calling Walker a villain are wrong." I agree. In the comics, he's a definitive anti-hero, and Disney looks like they'll stay true to that. I certainly hope so. Certainly hope so. Mr. Intellectual says, "Hello, Sir Rob. About Amazon. Hollywood creates and destroys their production teams multiple times over the course of making a film, which might be madness. Bezos' executive team knows that working together only improves over time." I totally agree with that. The reason they're dishing out these funds is to poach talent from other studios and convince them to stay. Bezos believes in establishing high-performing teams, and those that they think haven't gamed this out are seriously misguided. He will win. Well, Mr. Intellectual, I don't disagree with you, but I will say this. That should be the goal of anyone. I mean, anyone that's going to want to make, obviously we have these streaming services throwing all kinds of money at the studios. The studios don't work anymore. They don't work anymore. They are chasing. Do you think a studio would have made, like, I guess, the feature film equivalent of them? Probably not. But I mean, I think that the streaming services are like, "Hi, you're an interesting creator. Let me make it rain for you and go make something cool." I mean, like Scott Frank, who made Godless, a 7-episode miniseries that he wrote. Turned out great, right? "Hey, Scott Frank, what do you want to do next?" "Well, there's this Walter Tevis novel about this chick that plays chess." I mean, can you imagine pitching the Queen's Gambit? People try to make the Queen's Gambit. for decades. Can you imagine a studio going, oh yeah, man, we're totally going to make the Queen's Gambit. Wow, that's exactly, we're going to get right on that, even though it's based on Walter Tevis's novel where the Hustler and Color of Money came from. You couldn't get a studio to make that fucking movie. But you know what? Scott Frank, they already know at Netflix, well, you know what? Godless was pretty dope. If you want to turn this into a 7-episode miniseries, and they win. That show was a water cooler show for weeks. And even after it had been streaming, people talked about that for weeks as they discovered it. That's what you want. That's what you want creators to do. You don't have to spend $300 million to make Endgame to make some great entertainment. The studios have completely forgotten about that. Look what Jason Blum's doing. Look what Jason Blum, Lee Whannell makes. By the way, congratulations to Lee Whannell and to everybody that won Chainsaw Awards last night at the Fangoria Chainsaw Awards. Invisible Man won big. Lee Whannell, $8 million. Jason Blum, good for you. Released through Warner Brothers, $100 million later. That's what studios should be doing. Why aren't they doing more of that? I don't know. I have no idea, because you know what? They don't want to make that much money. They don't want to spend $8 million and make $100 million. They want to spend $200 million and make $1.5 billion. I get that. But what if you make 10 $8 million movies where you've spent $80 million and you make $100 million on each one of those? How about that balance sheet, huh? Huh? Am I right? It's harder, though. It's harder. Sheriff Carl says, dude, I find your intellectual and emotional honesty refreshing in the current cultural landscape. I love that you sent me a 420 tip, by the way, Carl. You seem like somebody I would and could be friends with in real life. I think we are friends in real life, though. Not that this isn't real life. You're a solid and authentic motherfucker. Metal. I think that's what being metal is. Metal, it doesn't get... Metal, you know what? People are asking me, what does it mean to be metal for the Midnight Metal Show? And I was thinking about it. I'm kind of... Is it... I think what you just said, being metal is to be a solid and authentic motherfucker. You have now defined what like Robservations is a show about something. Midnight Metal is about being a solid and authentic motherfucker. That's what it is. That's what being metal is. You've defined it, Sheriff Carl. I've got to have, maybe I'll have Zevius add that to the bottom of the artwork he made. Or I'll just put it on there. Midnight Metal. What is metal? I'm going to put that up as the definition. Metal. Being a solid and authentic motherfucker. That's it. I love it. Black Truck, King of the Blacks, sends in a tip and says, Rob, I know you may have seen the Chauvin verdict today. I don't want them to make Captain America black. It's just tokenism, man. Look at how the series is trying to convince the masses so much. For what? It's not worth it, man. Maybe one day America will be... I gotta say, look, I totally disagree with you. I totally disagree with you. Why? Because the Marvel Cinematic Universe is taking cues from the Marvel comic universe, where they've been doing this kind of thing for years. Both Bucky and Sam have been Captain America at one point. And I think what's really interesting is Sam Wilson, what better person to inherit the mantle of Captain America than him? You know, from the time they met, comrades at arms. I mean, I think it's terrific. Yeah, I think it's great. I mean, admittedly, I know someone's going to accuse me. They're going to be like, "Well, Rob, you just want a new hot toy of Captain America with wings and a shield." That is true. I cannot wait to when we are introduced to invariably what is going to be the new Captain America, when Anthony Mackie takes on the role of Captain America and we get a new hot toy, and I'm sure that suit, you know, Shuri ain't no dummy. I'm sure when she designed that new suit with the wings and the Captain America colors, I'm sure that Bucky called Shuri up and said, hey, well, Io told Io, hey, give this message to Shuri for me. But I'm sure they talked on the phone. Shuri, I don't exactly know. Hang on here. I don't exactly know what Shuri has come up with, but I think we all are going to owe her a great debt of gratitude right here. Oh, hang on. Let me, I should put her in the throne of Wakanda. So, until let me pose her. Here is Shuri, where she's probably sitting, at least right now, until we know something else. By the way, how cool is this? Thank you, Hot Toys, for making the throne of Wakanda. Whatever that box is that was sent in, it's going to be fucking badass. And I know that they're going to drop the Hot Toy like the day after, and I'm there for it. Can't wait. But I think Sam's earned it. Louis Terrasa sent in a super chat and says, Yo, Rob, why is Campia always so down? Jesus Christ, I'm so glad you speak your mind when you're there, and he keeps saying that there are no multiverses. Well, I mean, you have to have read the comics. And as I said on the John Campia show this morning, as I've said on the show a million times, I love the multiverses. When I was a kid, nothing made me happier than the JLA, JSA, the Justice Society of America and the Justice League team-ups. And for me, since I was a little kid, there was the multiverse. Crisis on Earth 3 or Earth S. Earth S was the Shazam. I mean, the Shazam family was from a various Earth in the DC universe after they were absorbed. So, yeah, I mean, I know. I mean, look, I've loved this stuff my whole life. I love multiverses, the Mirror Universe, Star Trek 1968, the 67-68 season, Mirror Mirror, written by Jerome Bixby. One of my favorite episodes of television. Come on. I've loved multiverses. Ash Chauhan says, imagine being the only family living in an area that doesn't want you there. Every move you make is looked upon with suspicion. Your home is not even safe. Rather, it's a target to let everyone know where you reside. This is horrific and the crux of them. Amen, sir. That's exactly what it is, and that's why it's so great. I mean, here, they think they're living the American dream. You're buying a house in a nice neighborhood. And these are things, by the way, they happened. I was reading an article, I want to say it was Harry Belafonte, or somebody like that, bought a house in Hancock Park, a very wealthy area of Los Angeles. And their neighbors, I think it was Harry Belafonte, they had a cross burned on their lawn here in LA, like in the 50s. I mean, this is not something that's made up. And everyone's like, oh, I don't want, sure, you don't want to deal with it. But, I mean, it's presented in the context of horror. It's supposed to be horrific. I mean, you're absolutely right. What happens when your home becomes someplace that you're a prisoner of, trapped in? Terrible. Louis Terraza says, Rob, I'm a pretty big fan of Star Trek, but definitely not as much as you. But I'm curious, do you think it ultimately failed because the material is too highbrow and the 80s and 90s became action-oriented in Hollywood? No way for it to match this, right? Well, remember, Louis, Star Trek didn't go off the air. The Berman era didn't end until 2005. No, I'll tell you exactly where Star Trek went wrong. Star Trek went wrong because it got stale. The Berman era of Star Trek lasted. It was you had TNG, which 7 years of greatness, and then you had Deep Space Nine, which picked up momentum as it went. But by the time they got to Voyager, as much as I can enjoy certain episodes of Voyager, Voyager was a show of Star Trek tropes. It would bring in the Borg, but then it did crazy stuff with them. I think Voyager is a very schizophrenic show. When it was good, it was really good. But when it was bad, it was not good at all. So it was a show of Star Trek tropes. After Deep Space Nine, they wanted to go back because their ratings were flagging. And then when they did Star Trek Enterprise, they really wanted to do more of a West Wing-esque political show where the first season would be on Earth, and they would launch the NX-01 at the end of the season. Well, unfortunately, the network said, no, you can't do that. And I think ultimately, Brandon Braga came on board the Next Generation in its fourth season, and then stayed on till the end of Enterprise. They needed new creative blood, still overseen by Berman, but they needed to do different things, unique things. They needed to go out and do things that they hadn't done before. And it just got stale. It was 25 seasons. 25. Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, and Enterprise were 25 seasons of Star Trek over 18 years, because some of the seasons ran concurrently. And 4 movies that were, again, not so great. And I think that the powers that be, God bless Rick Berman, but he should have taken a step back and brought in different showrunners and still oversaw and maybe tried some new things. They just didn't. But you know what? If you're making that fine cheddar, and Brannon and Rick both did extremely well in their lives because of Star Trek, and as long as they were on it. I don't think it was because of what was going on in the 80s or 90s at all. I think they just needed to take Star Trek in new directions, the same way that Deep Space Nine was a different direction from TNG. Voyager was more of a return to the same, and they were rehashing. It was Star Trek tropes. Let's mix two characters together. Let's have, instead of Data, we'll have a holographic doctor. Let's do on a quest for humanity. I mean, it was all kind of the same thing, unfortunately. Regretful Stoner sends in a tip and says, I got so stoned once, I thought I was the $6 million man, and I ripped my left arm and right foot off, thinking a rocket launcher would be found. I didn't find any. I ripped my other leg off and didn't find it either. Now I only have one arm. Well, Regretful Stoner, I don't think losing limbs is your problem. I think losing your mind is probably your problem. But there you go. I understand. I want to thank you, though, for telling us that story on 420, dude. Let's get those tank nugs. Yes. Nick Parrish says, so, Rob, I have to ask, with Scarlet Witch having had her own show, John Walker getting ready to become U.S. agent, and Hawkeye coming soon, could all of these shows based on lower tier characters be setting up for a Dark Avengers team led by John Walker? Ooh, I think so. I think we're getting either the Thunderbolts, or we are getting led by the Power Broker, perhaps, or we are getting Young Avengers. I don't know if we'll get to Dark Avengers, but maybe. I think we're getting a Thunderbolts team, and I think we're going to get Young Avengers. I think that's where we are going with that. Louis Terrazas sends in a super chat and says, metal is to be real as fuck, big dog. Metal! Yeah! You're absolutely right about that. Louis, thanks for supporting the channel, by the way. Imran Jabbar sends in a chat and says, hi, Rob, hope you're well. You've convinced me to watch them. That's for sure. Also, I recently watched Silent Running, and I was taken aback by the emotional resonance I felt by the time it ended, and the effects really hold up. Have you seen it? Thoughts? I showed my mom Silent Running on videotape when it first came out on VHS, probably in like 1982. I'm a huge fan of Silent Running. Of course, Douglas Trumbull, who did the effects for Blade Runner and Close Encounters, he directed that movie, and it was written by Michael Cimino, or co-written by Michael Cimino and Stephen Bochco. Michael Cimino, who directed The Deer Hunter, and Stephen Bochco, who created so many classic TV shows. They co-wrote that movie. And, of course, Joan Baez sang the theme song. Huey, Dewey, and Louie. I love Silent Running. As a matter of fact, I just bought the new Arrow. I have Silent Running on Laserdisc. I've had it on VHS, Laserdisc, DVD, and I have multiple copies on Blu-ray. I'm a huge fan. And the effects do hold up. Trumbull knew what he was doing. And here's something. There's a documentary on the making of Silent Running that's really good that was actually shot by Chuck Barbie, who was my cinematographer on Free Enterprise. I don't know what that means, but there you go. I'm a huge fan. I'm glad you liked it. Papas V, or Papas 5, says, hey, man, I don't know how the hell I found you, but I like this metal concept. I stayed up all night, and I need to know. Right now, I'm feeling down as I have a lot going wrong in my life. What movie or movies should I watch as I get stoned this weekend? Well, if things are going wrong in your life, I watch Almost Famous, the long version. That's also a good movie to get stoned when you watch. It's great. Maybe Dazed and Confused, too. If you're gonna that's actually a pretty good double bill. Watch that double bill. Let's see. Feel good movies. If you haven't seen it, Amélie. That's a good movie to get stoned too. It's French, but watch it in French with some subtitles. Let's see. What's another really another? The Natural. You like baseball? Watch The Natural. Field of Dreams. Watch that too. Field of Dreams. Yeah. Those start there, you know. You know what I just got on Blu-ray? The original Bad News Bears. Watch that. That'll make you feel good too. But I'm glad you're here, Papas. Glad you're here. Is that like Officer Pappas from Point Break? The dead presidents are surfers. Evan Newman says 11:55, almost midnight. Enough time for one more story. One more story before 12, just to keep us warm. In 5 minutes, it will be the 21st of April. Happy Fog's Day Eve, Rob. Don't go outside between 12 and 1 tonight. I did not know that. I might have to watch The Fog, which, by the way, looks great on 4K. Woo! I love The Fog. You know what? Watching that movie now, I know no one has cell phones in it, but it's kind of timeless. I really love The Fog. Johnny Boy hit it out of the park with that one. Is that Carnell? Carnell, Mike me Carnell. Hi, Rob. Speaking of people who are metal, I was curious if you've heard of Eric July. Yes, also known as Young Rippa 59. I watch him quite a bit, actually. I think he would be an interesting guest to have on your channel if you were to talk Marvel. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if our politics are the same, but I definitely watch his channel. So it could be fun to have him on. I think that would be metal. I don't know if he really knows me, though. It's kind of hard to talk to people. And if they don't know you, maybe he does. I don't know. But on that note, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening to my rant. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, kind souls, gentle beings, from all of us across, not from all of us, from, what am I saying? I don't even know what I'm saying. I want to thank you for coming on this show today. I want to thank you for supporting the chat supporting the show through super chats and tips and all that, and especially letters. If you want to write me a letter, please do so at the Burnettwork.net website. I want to thank my excellent moderating staff. Did I put you through hell today? I want to thank the Richard. I want to thank Mike Bodden. Bunyan Snipe is here. Louise X Sparrow is here. I don't know who else is here. Do I see anybody else? I'm going back. Bunyan Snipe is here. Thank you all for being here. I don't know who else is here. That's the last, but you all are great. Thank you for my moderating staff. They are wonderful. I thank the lucky stars I have you every single day. I'll be back on the John Campea show tomorrow. I'll be back here tomorrow. I'm sure I'll have a less ranty rant topic, but I think you should all watch them. I thought it was a pretty interesting show. Remember, I've only got to episode 5, and that was fucked up. Episode 5's fucked up. I mean, the show's fucked up, but if you're going to watch them, just prepare yourself, because I'm like, ooh, it's fucked up. Hardcore. So yeah. And on that note, remember, every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear, and all you have to do is listen. And with that, I'll say to everybody, have a better day. And I mean that. So I'll look into the Young Rippa thing. Maybe he'll come on the channel. I don't know.